Here's a guy who thinks that atheism destroys reason.
Okay, so before I begin, I have to qualify the form of atheism I'm going to be talking about in this video and why I'm focusing my attention on it. Because every time I do a video about atheism, I inevitably get multiple video replies from atheist channels accusing me of lumping atheism into one subset or just attacking a straw man. Obviously, not all atheists are the same or believe the same things, but this kind of atheism I want to examine today was adhered to and promoted by some of the most prominent atheists in history. And the comments I most often see from atheists on my channel are assuming the truth of this system of thought, which is naturalism.
No, we're not assuming it, we're deducing it from the incoherence of the alternative. Not only is there no evidence of the supernatural, which alone makes it reasonable to at least inductively infer that there is no such thing, every conception of the supernatural I've ever heard has involved self-contradictory notions like non-physical substances and timeless and spaceless entities.
Naturalism is the belief that only the natural world exists and that all phenomena can be explained from within it.
No, naturalism doesn't make any assumptions about what can or can't be explained. It just says that supernatural concepts can't do the explaining because supernatural concepts can't be tested.
There is no supernature or the supernatural or dimensions of reality outside the natural world. And if we hope to inquire about reality, the physical sciences, which focus their field of inquiry on the natural world, is all that we need.
It's all that can possibly work.
And since only the natural world exists, we have no need of a God who exists outside the natural world because there is no outside the natural world.
Since the natural world is space-time, how could something coherently be outside of it? Outside is a spatial orientation, so how could something have a spatial orientation independent of space itself?
And when I've addressed this belief as a form of atheism in the past, I had multiple comments and video replies claiming that this version of atheism is utterly foreign to them and that I'm erecting a straw man to make my job easier. Which I have to admit I was a little dumbfounded by because this view was held and promoted by a whole cast of extremely prominent and influential thinkers such as David Hume, Karl Marx, whose theories about history, politics, and human nature are astonishingly resilient and influential in spite of the tens of millions of dead people who were victims of those ideas. Bertrand Russell, who should need no introduction, John Dewey, who basically revolutionized education as we know it, and virtually all of the new atheists such as Dawkins, Dennett, and Harris, as far as I can understand them, they all appear to be naturalists.
I'm sure most atheists are naturalists, but not all atheists are naturalists. You can be an atheist and still believe in magic and ghosts. Also, not all naturalists are atheists. There are naturalists who believe in a God who is a natural phenomenon.
So, please don't reply that this is an uncommon form of atheism. It is arguably the most common, which is why I primarily focus my attention on it. But I've also heard several replies that have claimed that atheism isn't a belief or a worldview or a system of thought at all. It's just withholding of belief in God or gods until sufficient evidence can be offered.
Some atheists define atheism in such a way as to include agnosticism, some don't. Both definitions are perfectly legitimate.
Which, okay, if that's how you define your atheism, then well and good. But that's not how atheism has historically been defined. And the cast of characters I just named, like Russell and Dewey and Marx and Hume, they wouldn't agree with that definition.
Perhaps they wouldn't use that definition, but it doesn't make any sense to disagree with a definition because words mean whatever people use them to mean.
And I simply, forgive me for saying this, I just don't believe people who have entire YouTube channels dedicated to explaining their thinking as mere withheld beliefs. I've withheld my beliefs on a whole range of subjects like Bigfoot or UFOs, which is why I don't spend any time talking about them.
My atheism is more than just withholding belief with respect to the most common conceptions of God. I don't understand what it even means to say that a God exists. But I don't see why a person needs to affirm the non-existence of God in order to enjoy debunking bad arguments for God.
Atheism is the positive claim that there is no such thing as God, and naturalism is the claim that all reality is contained within the natural physical world and that nothing outside of it, such as supernature or God, exists whatsoever.
Again, there are naturalist definitions of God, so naturalism and theism are not mutually exclusive. Pantheism, for example, is a naturalist conception of theism.
And if that were true, then I intend to argue that reason would have to be denied along with it. And I suspect that not too many atheists would be eager to make that concession because reason seems to be the cause they identify with the most in their community or movement or tradition or whatever you want to call it. Sam Harris wrote a book called The End of Faith with the subtext that said The Future of Reason. Richard Dawkins lent his name to The Foundation for Reason in Science. And Bertrand Russell once famously said, as soon as we abandon our reason and are content to rely on authority, there is no end to our troubles. But reason simply can't exist in a naturalist world.
I don't think you understand what reason is. Reason is a way of thinking. You seem to think that reason is a set of rules that exist as woo-woo, spooky, platonic forms. Reason is a set of rules that describe the boundaries between what seems to make sense and what does not. There doesn't need to be some non-physical force or entity keeping contradictions from being true. I don't believe that contradictions are true because when I try to think of something both existing and not existing at the same time and in the same respect, I find that I can't. Why does naturalism have to be false in order for that to consistently be the case?
If naturalism is true, then reason, like God and religion, is mere illusion, which should be treated with just as much suspicion and perhaps contempt as all of these atheists treat the question of God. And to explain why I make this claim, we have to take a second to describe what reason is. So reason is our ability to examine the world around us and to infer what is true about it.
No, it isn't. First of all, reason does not require us to make any inferences about the world around us. Reason can function a priori. Secondly, it's not about inferring truth, it's about discerning which inferences make sense to us and which don't.
And such inferences often come from things unknown. The answer to a riddle or a problem is only arrived at through reasoning, and we see this all the time in something like algebra. We might say that we don't know what the value of x is, but we do know that y equals 1 and that x equals y. Therefore, our reason is able to uncover the solution, which is that x equals 1.
Right, if I believe in the given premises, I can't help but believe in the conclusion. That's just how my brain works. Why can't that be a physical phenomenon?
And notice what we're doing when we use our reason. We are moving into the abstract of our minds, the abstract being non-physical reality.
What do you even mean by non-physical? My mind is an activity carried out by my brain. The inference that I make is a function of how my brain works. Why is that not a physical function? How is it that we can build electronic and even mechanical systems that can carry out these same functions if they're not physical?
Our minds allow us to step outside the reality we are considering and then examine it, weigh it in the balance, and determine based on that deliberation what is true about it.
No, it allows us to discern how we understand it. If I believe that y equals 1 and x equals y, then I don't understand what it would mean for x to not equal 1. This is why I can't believe in the Trinity. If Jesus is God and God is the Father, then I don't understand what it would mean for Jesus to not be the Father.
It's as though we are sitting above the facts we are considering and organizing them in a pattern we call reasoning, which then tells us something about the real world that we are considering. But if naturalism is true, then that means that everything and every event can be explained by natural causes.
No, it doesn't. It's not at all contrary to naturalism to say that some things can't be explained at all. Also, supernatural explanations can't explain anything because explanations can be used to make testable predictions, and the supernatural can't be used to make any testable predictions.
Like you and I are explained by the cause of our parents, and they by their parents, and all the way back until you reach the cause of the human species, which is itself caused by some biological ancestor, which is then caused by biological existence or life itself, and so on and so on.
What do you think caused life itself? I think it's chemistry, but I doubt that's what Brian believes.
The Earth was presumably caused by some celestial collision of matter, energy, and forces like gravity. My indigestion is caused by the thing that I ate that I shouldn't have. And the natural sciences are the mechanism we have for examining this vast sequence of cause and effect, which explains, in theory, everything that can be explained. But here's where the naturalist runs into a big problem, because the psychological processes in our minds are also natural events, which means that they must have a natural cause if naturalism is true. They must be inevitable events forced to occur by that long chain of events in the sequence of cause and effect.
No, they don't need to be inevitable. Not everything that happens in nature behaves deterministically.
But the kind of reasoning we described earlier is not inevitably caused. It's something that steps outside of the variables and examines them and draws conclusions about them.
While not everything in nature is inevitably caused, reason seems very much to me like it is. Again, if I believe that y equals 1 and x equals y, I can't help but believe that x equals 1. You could say that if I believe the given premises, I inevitably believe in the conclusion. It follows by logical necessity. How is that different from inevitability?
It appears to sit above and independently from all these natural events. But if it's just one of the natural events in question, then it can't be claimed that it was arrived at through whatever it is that we mean by reason. And we all intuitively seem to know this because something people do all the time to discredit the opinions of others as irrational is by accusing them of being caused by something other than reason.
Yeah, but it doesn't follow from this that reason is not itself causal.
If your thoughts are caused by something else, like patriotism or mind-altering drugs, then they aren't based on some independent process we call reason. And if naturalism is true, then all beliefs are actually caused in this way, which would then invalidate reason itself.
The problem with beliefs that are produced by irrational inferences is not that they are caused. Rational beliefs are also caused. The issue is that they don't make sense. If I hold a belief that doesn't make sense, the more I think about it, the harder it is to continue to hold that belief. Rational beliefs are the only ones that seem to stick in the long run. In that sense, reason is even more deterministically causal than any other means of arriving at a belief. That's what's great about reason. It's a feature, not a bug.
Far from being free from the impositions of natural causes, it turns out to be subject to and under the dictates of all irrational causes. And if all that is going on in my mind is just a sequence of inevitable effects by irrational causes, why should I trust any of the conclusions of my mind as having something valid to say about the world or about truth?
I believe in deductive inferences because I don't understand what it would mean for them to be false. I can't help but believe in them.
In fact, if what we call reasoning is actually just the caused events in our psychological systems, then whatever we might say about reality is actually just statements about the events in our minds, which really have nothing to do with external reality. Our so-called reasoning about the outside world turns out to simply be utterings about events going on inside of ourselves. And what we call reason is actually just an elaborate trick of those events, which convinces us that we have some freedom in arriving at well thought out conclusions.
Nothing seems at all free about believing in a conclusion that follows by logical necessity. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.